Bioshock 4 is an upcoming first-person shooter video game that is being developed by Cloud Chamber and is published by 2K. The last entry in the series, Bioshock Infinite, was released back in 2013, and fans have been anxiously waiting to see what is coming next for the franchise. So let's break down the scrapped concept, leaks, and more. As always, all the sources will be posted in the description below, so make sure to check those out and support those writers. And with that out of the way, let's get into everything we know about Bioshock 4. So the news starts with Irrational Games, which announced in 2014 that the studio was going to be winding down after the final DLC was released for Bioshock Infinite. If you don't know, Irrational Games is the studio who was behind the original Bioshock, back when the studio was called 2K Boston, and then more recently Bioshock Infinite. And a lot of the credit initially for Bioshock, its reception, world building, and bringing the studio together was Ken Levine, who was the creative director and lead writer, and was the one really credited with the Bioshock story. And it shocked a lot of fans to hear that Irrational Games was letting go of all but 15 of their employees to continue work on a smaller project. Levine's statement on the issue said, quote, "While I'm deeply proud of what we've accomplished together, my passion has turned to making a different kind of game than we've done before. To meet the challenge ahead, I need to refocus my energy on a smaller team with a flatter structure and a more direct relationship with gamers. In many ways, it will be a return to how we started, a small team making games for the core gaming audience." So right after this was announced, fans were worried about how the series would continue without Levine, considering the only Bioshock title he didn't work on was Bioshock 2, and that went on to be one of the more controversial entries in the series. And for a time, the only news we had gotten about Bioshock's future is that it would not include Irrational Games and Ken Levine. Now, we didn't hear anything else about the game until 2018. Notable gaming journalist and insider Jason Schreier wrote an article about Mafia, which is another 2K property, along with Bioshock, and included some small information about the future of Bioshock in his Kotaku article. Schreier stated that some of the developers who had worked on Mafia 3 went to go work on a top-secret studio next door, which was for the next Bioshock game. He mentioned the new project was codenamed Parkside, and had already been recruiting developers to work on the project, and very little information ever got out about the game. At the time, Schreier reported that Parkside was still trying to figure out what the core gameplay would be for this next Bioshock title, and was slowly going to build up development as needed. That way it could stay secret and word wouldn't get out, and they also wouldn't have to worry about rushing something out just because they have so many people on their pay. Fans were shocked at how casually Jason Schreier had slipped this information about one of gaming's most beloved franchises. But with this information, he also stated that the development started in 2014 and that the article was written in 2018. So little was still known about the game, which was a red flag for many members of the community. Because if the game started development in late 2014 or 2015, that was right around the time when Levine said Irrational Games would not be working on the next Bioshock, and said they would not be doing any more Bioshock. So 2K started really quickly trying to decide what the next game would be, which is interesting to note given this whole timeline. And then we jump ahead to September of 2018 when a 4chan leak was released with alleged insider details about Bioshock 4. As always, all leaks should be taken with a grain of salt, but still at the time of recording, this leak has not directly been disproven, and the community is still debating the validity. But let's get right into the leak. The leaker claims that on an internal report from 2K, it gives information about the next Bioshock and said the next Bioshock would be announced in the next fiscal year. They state the game's production started 3 years ago, which puts the timeline start right at 2016, and that the codename Parkside had officially changed its name to Bioshock 3. And the leak itself also claims that the name Bioshock 3 was chosen because the development team decided to create a direct sequel to the Bioshock 2 story, which is an interesting choice to say the least. As for the game itself, the leak states that the game is set in 1971 London. The world is still suffering the consequences that brought the events of the Fall of Rapture. The world now knows about plasmids and Adam, and they have brought many nations of the world to an unprecedented new golden age. But because of this, it's unleashing innumerable crises towards the search for a perfect utopia. I don't want to spend too much time on the ending of Bioshock 2 and the story itself, but the game has varying degrees of good, neutral, and bad endings that the players can get depending on actions they take in the game. But the one consistency among all the endings is the main character, Delta, dies at the end of the game, and Eleanor Lamb lives and is now on the surface, which is basically all you have to know moving forward to understand the basics of this leak and what they're trying to get at, with this Bioshock 3 being a direct sequel to Bioshock 2. The protagonist is a man named Lucas, an orphan of American origins who worked for a certain period in his life in the head of freight forwarding and supply at the main suppliers of Ryan Industries, and who now lives for years in London as an apartment thief. The plot starts with him finding himself being connected to the fall of Rapture and is charged by an undercover agent of the Pinkerton Agency. The prologue of the game takes place during another robbery, but during the escape, Lucas is hiding in a clock tower and meets a woman there. Her name is Eleanor Lamb, and warns Lucas to pay attention to the so-called gentlemen, which are made from Columbia and who now receive orders from companies. These gentlemen are a new and evolved type of Big Daddy prototypes and are protectors of the Lady. The Lady recovers Adam from those who have abused it, and Eleanor also warns him to stay away from the clock tower. Other known characters are the Tenenbaum, the Lutece twins, who will all return for the main plot. The leak goes on to say that the second part of the leaked document contains design structure, development plans, and publication plans for the game. The leak states that the game system will be a hybrid of Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite. The game's maps will be larger and richer than previous games, along with enhancing environmental destructibility and more plasmid effects which can be combined. And there will also be two types of maps in-game, open world and linear, which gives players a good mix of the narrative component along with exploration. Finally, the leak states that marketing has not been clearly defined, but GAAS type, or Gaming as a Service, has been discussed, which is a way to make money post-launch of the title. So it doesn't always mean microtransactions, it could be DLC, but usually it does mean some sort of microtransactions, even if it's just cosmetic. Now they state that they have been discussing the gaming as a service method, so that the development experience can last at least a year for the game. They also state the game will come to current and next generation consoles, and the team at 2K wants to announce the game publicly between December of 2019 and March of 2021. And then in November of 2019, fans noticed that 2K Games had started a new studio in Novato, California, and had speculated it could be for the next Bioshock, but were worried when job listings were posted by 2K for this new studio looking for end game design leads who would be responsible for building a post-narrative set of systems, quests, and player progression that gives our fanatic fangirls and fanboys more content to experience on an ongoing live service basis. And that wasn't all we got in November. A user, that RPG CSM, put together a list of developers known to be in the Novato area and could potentially be working on the new Bioshock title. Hogarth de la Plante as a creative director on the title, who previously had worked on Bioshock 1 and 2, Sean Elliott, who had previously worked on Bioshock Infinite, Jeffrey Yalom, who had worked on Far Cry 3, and the list goes on, and as you will see as we get further on, a lot of these were spot on. So it seemed like they were putting something together, and that a lot of former Bioshock staff members were all coming together in this area, and it seemed like fans had put together the pieces before 2K was even ready to announce. And then like clockwork, right as the leak said, 2K Games officially announced the new Bioshock in December of 2019. Along with this announcement, 2K also announced that a new studio, Cloud Chamber, would be working on the development of the game in California, but that the game would still be in development for the next few years. The team is actually split between two locations, one in San Francisco and one in Montreal, and the new studio is being led by Kelly Gilmore, who is most known for her work on XCOM and Sid Meier's Civilization. IGN actually reached out to Gilmore for more clarification on this new title and studio, and she stated that the game is still early in the process and would not have answers whether the game would be a direct sequel to any of the previous Bioshock games or a reboot, and she instead called the game the next iteration in the Bioshock franchise. When asked about the new area or what world we'd be going to if it was new, Rapture or Columbia, she instead said, "We hope that fans love our future plans for the environment." And Gilmore also did confirm that Ken Levine would not be returning in any form to work on the project, but Cloud Chamber would be bringing back former Bioshock alum to work on this new game. She mentions De La Plante as the creative director, Scott Sinclair, he's returning as the art director, and Jordan Pelling is the design director after being the creative director on Bioshock Infinite. Which is crazy that she announced these and that a fan had already figured it out 1 month before with so many more people. And it's at least nice to hear that although it might be a new studio, they were very tactical about hiring people who had worked on previous entries in the Bioshock world and made sure that they have good positions where they can actually impact the game. So a lot of director positions are all filled by people who have worked on previous titles. And when asked about the live service elements of the new Bioshock, especially considering the job listings and rumors, Gilmore said she could neither confirm nor deny those plans. And so far, this is why so many fans were really shocked by this leak, because up to this point it was spot on. It got the announcement right, it got the live service components what we think as right, and then we still are just waiting on story and a few of those other things they claim. And then once again, on the same day of this big 2K announcement, Jason Schreier wrote an article about the new Bioshock and gave more behind the scenes details. Schreier actually stated that the new Bioshock development started in 2015, although it has been rebooted since then, and that the original development was started by Certain Affinity, the studio who is most likely known for assisting development on Halo and Call of Duty and Doom, and that they were actually the original studio that 2K reached out to start working on Bioshock 4 in 2015. But Schreier states by the end of 2016, 2K took back control of the IP and had Certain Affinity cease development, and they actually wanted one of their own in-house studios to work on the project. Schreier then states that the project was moved to Novato, California in 2017, and 2K was quietly staffing up the project, which lines up with, as we know now, the leaks and rumors, and that the team stayed small and the game entered pre-production. So Schreier said they could have announced back in 2017 that the studio was formed and they started working on the project, but for some reason 2K wanted to stay quiet and gave them a few years before this official announcement in 2019. So to me, it sounds like the game is not as early in development as 2K would like the community to believe, which is probably better in an age when games are announced when nothing has been worked on, so at least we know they have a plan and feel confident enough to announce the title formally without having to worry about another scrapped idea or a reboot. And the idea of Bioshock working in secret before the official announcement is not a new concept for the series. Levine, when he was working on Bioshock Infinite, actually said in an article after the fact that Bioshock Infinite started development in late 2007 and was worked on in secret for 2.5 years until 2010, when the game was formally announced by 2K. And the game still wasn't released until 2013. So it was in development for total about 5.5 years, and I could definitely expect something similar for this new Bioshock title. Take-Two announced in their earnings report that the new Bioshock would still be in development for the next several years, so I would definitely expect a similar situation as Infinite. So even though the game was announced in 2019, I wouldn't expect a release until 2022 or potentially even 2023, depending on other releases from Take-Two and 2K and what investors want. And this would give them a good chunk of time, about 5 years, to work on the title, a few of which were done in secret. Okay, so now let's close out by breaking down some job openings that have been listed and what they tell us about the game. The most interesting is a listing for a lead combat/AI designer, and the description for the position says an FPS combat paradigm that is accessible, satisfying, and allows for a high degree of player expression and experimentation within a highly reactive world. They want applicants to look beyond direct conflict and accommodate various playstyles and design encounters that can be resolved through player ingenuity. Which got fans excited because it does sound like there will be different playstyles. The game is staying to its first-person shooter roots, and it looks like it will be even bigger than it was before, with all these different playstyles, a highly reactive world, and different ways to solve these encounters. So it all sounds like it could all be tying together and got fans excited. And another listing for a senior AI engineer says, quote, "We have high ambitions for tying AI and storytelling together, and it will be your responsibility to crystallize that ambition around several AI systems. This includes an urban crowd system and systemic tribal ecology of a sometimes hostile AI." And the crowd system itself definitely sounds like it still could be London and doesn't rule that out. And I'm excited too that they're going to start adding in these bigger areas, more AI, some of which will attack you and some of which will be passive. Another job listing that had the entire community excited too is about the world that Bioshock 4 will be set in. A job posting for a lead environmental modeler states, quote, "We want you to set the example, leading efforts to help us breathe life into a new and fantastical world." Now, the fact it talks about a new world has fans thinking that we might not be going back to Rapture or Columbia, and instead the game will be something completely new, which is fine by me, or we just could be reading into it too much by saying a new and fantastical world. But obviously, this is up for interpretation, and we probably won't know until the game is actually announced. It's also important to mention that multiple job listings have mentioned next generation consoles, so it does get more confusing if we will see this game just on next generation or current gen as well. We'll just have to wait and see for that. I wouldn't hold my breath for current generation consoles, especially if the game is a few years out. So where does that leave us now? Well, we'll be waiting for quite a while is the first thing. Even if Bioshock 4 has been in development for a few years, they are still obviously ramping up production, making hires. It's a relatively new studio working on the project, and they are most likely developing for next generation consoles, all of which take more time than the average development. The developers themselves are still figuring out how to optimize next gen. They're still figuring out how to work together in this new studio, and they're constantly adding new hires, so getting them up to date and then getting this game moving forward, which is why it will probably take more time than an average normal development cycle. Also, the leak still has not been debunked as far as I know, and some of the information seems to be legit, and hopefully the project is not rebooted again. I'm really excited to see where they take the franchise in this new world, and also how they're going to name the game itself. The rumors say the game will actually be called Bioshock 3, while most fan rumors and everyone else have been thinking that they will go with Bioshock 4. So we'll just have to wait to see what they do with that as well. And that's where I'm going to end this video. Make sure to like and share, subscribe for weekly gaming videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.